got my attention. I stumbled across, we had John Naley on the podcast, so he was on a few times. We shared some guests, Gene Borello and Michael Frances. You had some pretty heavy hitters. So first, give us the genesis. Why did you start a podcast, and walk us through that?
So I guess the longer story is last year was my first year of college. I went to UC Santa Barbara, cool. And I then transferred to Boston University. But so my freshman year of college, when I was at UC Santa Barbara, I was basically looking to get out. I knew I'm from New York City, so I was like, you know what, this is not the place for me. You know, it's a beautiful place, but slow pace, not the energy I was looking for. And so I basically, at one point, about midway through the year, just completely isolated myself from everyone there, like just fully like cold turkey, stopped talking to people. And I was like, you know what, right now we're just going to focus on transfer applications and getting good grades so I can get out of here. And in that time, I was like, okay, definitely it was weird for me because I'm a pretty social person. Yeah. So I was like, all right, like what are other ways that we can kind of fill that void? And I don't even know why I isolated myself. It was mostly just like, I'm going to be out of here in 3-4 months. And so at that point I was just like, all right, let's look into this podcast thing. I was a huge UFC fan, still am, obviously. Had heard of this Joe Rogan guy and his podcast. So I was like, you know what? I've heard rave reviews about him, and I love Rogan as a commentator. Let me take a listen. And then I just became obsessed. I would listen 4 to 5 hours a day. I was, in between classes, listening on my bike ride to and from my dorm. I was, I would say no to eating dinner with friends and instead just listen to Rogan. Like, it was just nonstop. And I realized how much I enjoyed it, not just because of the content, but what I was learning. And it kind of hit me at one point where I would be listening and maybe I would be wondering something, and maybe a couple minutes later he would ask the question. And so I was like, okay, I'm pretty social. I am pretty confident in my ability to talk to people. And I really love, like, he has the coolest range of guests. And so I always felt like I wanted to talk to some of these people, but I just, I was just an ordinary person. It's like, what's the excuse for them to talk to me? They have so much, so little time. So at one point it just became like, okay, if I started this, what would it look like? And so, at that point I had finished up my applications and I just really started grinding. I mean, literally night and day. I would finish school, I would come home, hammer out emails, hammer out all the logistics of getting guests. And I mean, everything that goes into a podcast, the production, how it was going to start, I wanted out. Exactly. Like, I was 19 at the time. So it was like, okay, well, I'm young. How do I sound professional? Because, for me, I wasn't too worried about how it would sound in terms of my questions, at least earlier on. It was more like, I don't want to have this, shitty audio, and I'm already young and there's already no reason for people to listen to me. So, on top of that, audio quality is bad, video quality is bad. So there's a whole lot of things that I had to figure out. And then it was just, once I had all the foundations set, it was like hammer out a million emails, hope that one guest says yes. And then, one would say yes. And then I'd have a couple guests and they would see that the past guests were, if they respected them, maybe they would want to come on. And then likewise with sponsors, I'd hammer out thousands of emails, see if a sponsor would be willing to sponsor me. So that's just kind of the overall gist of how I got into it.
Well, when I get the sponsors, we're going to spend a minute on too, because people I think get into podcasting for the wrong reasons, and we'll talk a little about that arc of when do you get a sponsorship through your network and that kind of stuff. So okay, so the first observation was you got some pretty. So again, these are guests that I would say we overlap probably at least about 4 or 5 guests. And I've been doing this a minute. I've been doing this for over 2 years, and I'm not anywhere where I need to be. But I'm pretty good about getting people on the show. Just when I'm good. I always say, like, granted, I can't get like Donald Trump on or somebody super A-list right now, maybe. But anybody I wanted to get on that I envisioned, I got on. So give us, how did you get some of these people? Give us their names and and how do those interviews work for you?
So, in the beginning, it was like, all right, I'm 19. I don't have a career behind me. It's not like, if like a Bill Burr or like, I love Bill Burr. It's not, but it's not like if you have like an A-list celebrity who's like, I'm going to start a podcast, they have all their fans that automatically, gravitate. And it's already a big thing right when they start. For me, I'm 19. I don't have a whole career and I haven't really established myself at all. So it was like, okay, how am I going to do this? And at first it was like, all right, are there people that are closer to me that, maybe